Welcome to Prime Suspects. Alongside Adam Bjorn and Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr., I'm your host, Matt Landis. Today's topics: March Madness and a peek behind the curtain at Prime's early action, a sports betting deep dive on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, and SportTrade CEO Alex Kane's open letter to U.S. sports betting legislators and regulators. Kicking it off with the latest from inside Prime Sports, Adam, the brackets are set. What noteworthy action is Prime seeing on the NCAA men's and women's tournaments, and what do you anticipate rooting for when they tip off?
So on the futures, Florida's the worst, then Duke, then Auburn, and then a bit on Alabama. St. John's is another one that's getting plenty of action on the futures. One of the ones at 300 to 1 plus that is seeing some action is North Carolina, but that's where we're at the futures. As expected, getting favorite action, happy to take it. Always looking for a skinner to get home. On the games, the high volume games right now, Utah State, UCLA, it's getting good volume. Georgia, Gonzaga, Drake, Missouri, day one. And then day two, we've got Baylor, Mississippi State getting good action, Vanderbilt, St. Mary's, and Grand Canyon, Maryland. So there you go. Nothing outstanding positions needed. That last one actually needing Maryland over Grand Canyon. Oh, I don't know what kind of school they have out there in the Grand Canyon, but right now we're needing Maryland minus the points, which looks like a double-digit favorite.
It sounds like you're seeing healthy action across the board on the men's side. Anything noteworthy thus far with regard to the women's tournament?
Of course, you have to ask that when I've done no homework and looked at it.
Hey, my alma mater USC is a 1 seed. I've got to ask.
No. Unfortunately, for all the rumors and that for the past years about the women's action growing and growing and growing, nothing significant as yet.
Got it. Okay, well, we'll see how that continues to evolve over time. And let's shift gears from the action you're seeing so far to any betting or bracket tips you may have for the audience who's planning to either lock in some last-minute futures, bet the tournament as it progresses, or just enter one of many office pools that will be taking place throughout the country.
I've absolutely done no homework. There is a BTP Calcutta, I believe, Wednesday night for anyone wanting to get inside action on who's buying what and what they see as value. But right now, I have not looked at much. Just come back from New York, in Jamaica right now, about to get on a plane to Costa Rica. Currently have 6 kids in 4 countries, so hands are full right now.
You gotta prioritize. Well, Joe, let's see if there's anything at a high level that stands out to you here. I typically would think of it almost as the 3 S's, if you will: knowing your pool's settings, knowing the size of your pool, and being mindful of your surroundings. So if I'm going head to head in a small pool with Joe, I might want to think twice about betting some favorite teams in his neck of the woods that might not be reflected in nationwide numbers that we'll see across platforms such as ESPN in the coming days. Is there anything else at a high level that you've adopted over the years, Joe, when it comes to how to approach filling out a bracket or betting on the big dance?
I got to tell you, this is my favorite time of the year because this takes Joey back to when he first became an actual bookie, both in high school and in college. I can admit that now, can I? I mean, I already got a gaming license. I admitted through the Crucible. But no, I'll tell you what, I'm actually not fond of betting the tournament, even though it's my favorite event of the year on the calendar. Outweighs Super Bowl by a ton, simply because I don't know about anybody else, but I would sit back there. I would put together a couple of Phantom brackets, and then I would spend the first weekend absolutely rooting against my bracket. There's the head. All right, this is where I should be going. And then when little state teachers college is handing it to like a number 2 seed out of the AC seed, I'm all in it. Even if I had money on that game, I'd be terrible. I think it's great for bookies that, watching these guys come in, the smaller schools, the conferences that don't get the respect, where you get a team that wins their conference regular season championship or their conference tournament, and they come in and then immediately they're playing like the 4th or 5th team out of the Big Ten or the ACC or some power conference that really, they shouldn't be there. They're only there because of the conference and the way the rankings are, strength of schedule. It's so self-referential. It really is. It's a packed and rigged system. So seeing teams come out of I know out there somewhere, there's no way Rufus Peabody has rational money on his alma mater, but wouldn't it be great to see Yale be one of those rare Ivies that win in the first round of the tournament. It's just, I think it's great. It's great for bookies seeing those, upsets in the first 2 rounds. It's great seeing, small schools, mid-majors make it all the way to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, sometimes even the Final Four. They're still celebrating, George Mason's run to the Final Four. My daughter goes to George Mason. They still talk about it to this day like it just happened last week. I love this event. I love sitting back, but I'll tell you, I love taking bets on it more than I like betting it. That's for sure.
I think, Matt, it'd be interesting to go back and see what we said on last year's before this, now that we've actually been live on this Prime Suspects for a year now, because just coming to mind that round 2, I think watching round 1 games and betting in round 2, the bookies are just throwing up the numbers up based on data. For memory, I've probably said that last year, I've probably said it for the last 10 years. That for me is one of the keys. Watch round 1 games, and then as soon as those numbers come out, have an idea of what your number should be and bet round 2 games, because that's where I've seen the biggest weakness for a decade, and it still existed last year. So,
yeah, I think sage advice is everybody gets so amped up for 32 games in 2 days throughout the first round. The quick turnaround to round 2 can be very opportunistic for a lot of bettors out there. But to Joe's point as well, sounds like a lot of fun in store across both sides of the counter. And Joe, I think at some point I heard you use the phrase packed and rigged system. And that might have been a perfect bridge to our water cooler segment this week, because in its latest episode, Last Week Tonight with John Oliver explores sports betting, including how it became so ubiquitous, how it can be damaging, and how it can be fixed. So, Joe, sticking with that topic, what were your top takeaways from that episode, including what they got most right, as well as perhaps most wrong?
So let me preface this by saying, big John Oliver fan. I saw him when he was here at the Kennedy Center back before New Year's. He's a brilliant comedian. Let's not make the mistake that he, though, is a serious journalist, because there were so many areas where he conflated problems. When you have somebody, they're flashed on screen and they're giving testimony about whatever, but there's never any background given about a person, like what's their situation, who are they, or anything like that. Last Week Tonight is entertainment. It's very good entertainment. And in some ways, you've arrived if John Oliver is doing his big segment on you that week. Having said that, he was right about some stuff. I mean, it's clear about, and this, again, I don't know how many times I say it, like Harry Hairshirt, when we did legalization, we did not anticipate the massive over marketing, becoming like a garden variety consumer product like McDonald's or Coca-Cola or anything like that sports betting has grown to be. That's an arms race that I don't necessarily think is good. Well, really for the industry, because now it's made the industry a target of John Oliver and other folks. And it doesn't make us sympathetic. When we get into more serious issues regarding taxation, issue about prop betting and the NCAA, things like that, we are not in a sympathetic light. We are not on the front foot, so to speak. And it is entirely because of this in-the-face nature of the way that the industry is marketed today. Having said all that, it's very clear that Last Week Tonight folks were more interested in getting, power per punch in there than they were in actually being accurate. For instance, when they cited Dr. Fisher, which is a compelling story. Okay, I think we can all say that having Dr. Fisher on camera confessing to her, here's a psychologist who is confessing to the fact that she has a gambling addiction. And the story about her taking her son to a Steelers game and the son slowly realizing this isn't a work event, this is a gambling event, and admitting to that. I mean, yeah, that's compelling stuff. But Dr. Fisher lost her ass betting online casino. She wasn't betting sports. And there's a massive distinction here. When they went, to the gentleman who was citing data in the UK, and he cited an example of here's a player who redeposited 7 times in one day. He was doing casino. He was doing online casino. He wasn't doing sports. And this is the thing, is somehow it has become okay to just ignore that distinction to make the case about sports betting. I know Adam has said it so many times. I agree with him. Like, look, online casino, yeah, that can be very, very serious if that gets out of the box and it's uncontrolled in the way the environment currently is. Because the velocity on casino betting is so much higher than it is on sports betting. They had a lot of fun with Polish ping pong, which, geez, Polish ping pong. If you're sitting there and you're able to multi-table, blackjack, poker, things like that, slots, that's a much higher velocity. And it proves out when you look at the revenue numbers in states that have legal online casino. But again, because the sports betting industry has not made itself particularly sympathetic by being so in everybody's face, it's just easy for the John Olivers and other journalists of the world to be able to just skip over the fact that the real big problem gamblers are in online casino, not in sports betting. We're not saying that there aren't problem gamblers in sports betting. And I am one who's always saying we should be trying to do more than just got a problem 1-800-GAMBLER stamped at the bottom of all of our marketing materials. But I think this is what people see when, it's your turn in front of the firing squad with the media. You're not going to get huge depth. And even when you get reliable folks, John Oliver's won a few Peabody Awards. He's not a blogger. He's not on TikTok, but even he can't resist skimming over some of the facts, trimming some of the edges to just make a more compelling, entertaining, punchy argument against the industry.
Adam, I think earlier I heard you mention having 6 kids in 4 different countries, and somewhere out there, even Phillip Rivers might be jealous, but I would be surprised if you have had a chance to watch this John Oliver episode, given everything that's going on. That said, have you had a chance to check out any of it? And if so, anything to add to what Joe just shared?
I did. I watched the whole thing. I actually did homework for this last night. So I did watch that. I did read the next segment as well. Joe hit the nail on the head. I was coming in ready to fire away about sports betting versus iGaming. I 100% agree with the ad rollbacks, the in-stadium signs, all those kind of things. As Joe said many a times, they didn't foresee that when they were bringing this to the table and trying to get it legalized and spread it across on what it's done. But we've seen it in the UK. We've seen it in Australia. They've gotten ahead of it now where they're rolling it back, I think, to the detriment of the actual industry where they're killing it. And now it's just heading back to the grey or the black or wherever else. It highlighted the hypocrisy of the leagues as well. Currently, they're pulling in $250 million just from data and sponsorship after clearly, there was one example of someone not even being able to get an advert in the Super Bowl 15, 20 years ago as well. So clearly the leagues are now using sports betting to lobby their lackluster viewership. NBA definitely have been leaning into it. That was kind of their reasoning. The $20 bet with the $50 ticket kind of selling point as we came into the PASPA sale. The betting experts, I agree. Some of these coverages, you hear these people at the beginning of the shows selling their brands, selling their bets, clearly having little to any knowledge of what actual sports betting chances of winning, etc., are playing into it. And they're just, leading people down the garden path. I will argue against John Oliver on the betting of the Gatorade color. There is homework that's done on that. That isn't flip a coin and see what it is. This year clearly showed up what Kansas City had used previous years, what the Eagles had used previous years. There was scientific fact and data behind this year's Gatorade color. So I am going to argue to the death on that one. But, they highlighted people are out there to bet a toothpick to win a lumberyard. The American culture is moving that direction that the rest of the world has been for decades. I laugh these days when anyone mentions the offshore. America has the offshore in their backyard. It's called sweepstakes and it's 18 plus. It's not even 21. It's not regulated. This is a bigger, cancer or whatever they want to speak about of their industry is what's in their backyard. Forget about looking beyond the borders. Have a look at your backyard. Have a look at what's going on. The no oversight, age restrictions, and all those kinds of things have changed. There's a few other things. I definitely have placed bets on the toilet. I will admit that. more than once. So,
too much information. But he has 6 kids, so it's the only time he can get any privacy.
Yeah, I mean, despite it being, a comedic show and some serious information, it really come up. It's regulated versus unregulated. Our goal here at Prime and BetCris Arizona is being able to regulate the unregulated, trying to go after the niche that's still not regulated. Predatory operators, 100%. That's what they do. It's what they've done for decades. They've done it in the UK. They've done it in Australia. They've done it through marketing. Now that they have data that they can pinpoint your location, they can pinpoint the time of day that you normally bet. Maybe they know that on the way home from work, you're in your car and you're playing something, and they can just punch targets at you like that. iGaming versus sports betting, 100% is one of the big things. He brought up laws not being enforced in some states. Well, you enforce laws, you hurt taxes. So there's a game being played there as well. And then ultimately the VIP programs, like, it's predatory, 100%. It's kind of why we don't really have one. We're doing it in a different way and trying to just offer a service that people can come to. I did like the Gamblers Anonymous lady that said, the drug dealer doesn't come knocking on the door saying, hey, I haven't seen you in a few days. Do you need your fix? That's what sports books are doing. Oh, you haven't bet for a week? What's wrong? What do you need? Here's $100. Go bet. Like, there is some of those things that they can target, and they can try and clean it up a little bit to make it a bit more efficient. But I will say, I believe the UK, Australia, and some of those are far gone over the top. And all they're ultimately doing is driving grey market and black market business by going that. So it's a balance. Will they ever get it right? No idea. Is my right different than their right, and Joe's right and your right? Who knows? There is some cleanup that can be done, but it needs to be done in a sensible fashion. Otherwise, the market just goes offshore or goes somewhere else or goes to the sweepstakes.
And just one last note before we move on. When you watch that piece, I mean, obviously the references to DraftKings, Little Crown. Oh my God, that was so stupid. I don't know who approved that, but that person is in the office in Boston this morning cringing away. Unless it's the guy who went to Fanatics, and then who cares? But did any company come off worse last night on that piece than Fliff? And it was entirely because of boy, I don't want to spoil it for our dozens of fans who maybe haven't watched that piece yet. If you haven't, please do it. But the Fliff segment alone was worth the price of admission. I'm still wondering, what the hell does that word mean? And I guess John and his writers had an awful lot of fun with what it might potentially mean.
Indeed. And Joe, I know you said that would be the last note before we moved on, but there's one loose thread. I can't help but try to tug on, going back to something you kind of glossed over, Adam, mentioning that Prime doesn't have a VIP program in the same way that a lot of larger books do, but maybe looking to do things differently. Is there anything you can elaborate on when it comes to what a VIP type of program may look like at Prime in the foreseeable future?
Well, I mean, there's people that have high net wealth is 100% what we're looking at. We're not looking to get to someone that's, got a couple of $1,000s in their bank account and trying to just feed them. The other aspect of it is we don't have iGaming. Right now, we don't have iGaming in any state, and that's somewhat on purpose. It is available to us, but we just haven't lent into it. That's just who we are. We're sports betting first, plug in a casino if the opportunity really comes and we want to hit that. But it's just a downward spiral generally. So we're trying to build up the sports betting customers, understanding who they are, what they are, and then at some time we can plug that in. As for true VIPs, it's someone that even professional bettors probably get, some service that they will not get at other places because they're bringing us business that we want. I've said it many times. New Jersey is an arbitraging state, and there are people in there doing the Lord's good work in bringing us, action against the other bookies. It's just different. And it's really hard not to buy into it because you go to a conference and you see all these people making so much money off iGaming and all this stuff, but it's just not who we are to the core. And ultimately, it's just curating potential VIPs that have the means, that can't bet anywhere else, or just want to be able to be served in a certain way. And generally, everyone's a VIP that's come in the door so far because they're all getting top-line customer service. They're all getting whatever offers are available. There's no definitive here's one, let's milk them for all they can sort of mentality.
I realize I'm not at Prime anymore, but while we were there, saying like, oh, well, we don't have a VIP program. I talked to the players. I mean, you don't have to have this formalized system box to put them in. Like, here's our box over here that we put our quote VIP players in. One of the nice things that, because of our size that was afforded to us is we could call people, we could talk to them. I love talking. I would talk to the players all the time, and they would reach out to me as well. And it's more kind of like understanding, what does the individual want? That's why all right, we're going to punch up on Fan Kings. That's why that stupid sending a crown around to people thing was ridiculous. Okay. Like, I'm sure somebody thought it was a good idea because they spent the money to do it. And who knows how many people it went to. But once the player got it, what the hell did they do with it? Right? Does it occupy a place of honor in the middle of their home? Right? So that everybody who comes to visit their palatial McMansion gets to see their crown. Or, what's more important? It's like one of the things that we find is, hey, when you talk to the player and you get to know him a little bit, I mean, we all know that, look, this is sports betting business. This is not therapy. Okay. We're not marriage counselors or anything like that. But it is good to know, like, what is your player like? So when I talk to him and say, like, hey, if we wanted to do something nice for you, what would be a good thing? And it's amazing how, like, it could be simple as like tickets to the ball game or things like that, or getting tickets to the Taylor Swift concert because, the player, he's not really into stuff, but he's got a daughter that is a total Swiftie, like my daughter, and being able to get those tickets that he couldn't get for himself or something like that, or ringside at UFC or something. It's those little things, the experiences that seem to be much more important than like constantly shoveling out like branded tchotchkes. Like, you send somebody a leather bomber jacket with your logo on the back. And I've seen this. Other brands have done that. Like, how many times does that get worn? Our friend Ian Parkins loves to talk about the story about how when Barstool was still a sports book in our industry, that they sent out stuff that was, Barstool logo wear. It was all on Carhartt clothing, like Carhartt hoodies and hats and everything like that. But all they wound up doing was creating an aftermarket where people were selling the Carhartt hoodies online because they were such good quality. There was no brand loyalty. Nobody gave a shit about it. It was just like, how can I make an extra buck out of it? So I think a lot of times these are kind of like, people tell themselves like, well, we need this big, fantastic VIP program because we need it. And there's not really any thought going into like, but what does the customer really want? What would they look at? What would make them feel special? And then the other thing is like, not every guy who spends $2,000 is a VIP. And we get guys who come to us all the time and they say like, well, I'm a VIP at FanDuel, and I get that. And you ask them like, okay, well, what's your average bet and what's your average deposit? And look, anybody who plays with us we love them. But when somebody's making an average deposit of like $2,000 a month, like, we take bets bigger than that, right? So kind of understanding where people really do exist in the firmament is also a really important thing. If you're just if everybody is a VIP, nobody's a VIP. And that's the problem with those programs.
And keeping in mind the thoughtful approach that you mentioned, Joe, and then the point that you made, Adam, not looking to prey just on losing bettors, but people who may win, but they're bringing you business you want, specifically in a market like New Jersey, arbitrage bettors. Guys, this is my long windup to transitioning to our look ahead segment, because a lot of the arbitrage players in New Jersey are looking to play prime against an operator like SportTrade. And we can focus on SportTrade CEO Alex Kane's open letter to U.S. sports betting legislators and regulators, published in Steve Ruddock's Straight to the Point newsletter with a nice summary and perspective by Casino Reports. The key message seemed to be that for the sake of U.S. sports betting, something needs to change, and Kane proposes a few ideas, including tying tax rates to operator hold rates. Joe, what are your thoughts on the feasibility of the change he seeks becoming a reality?
I understand where Alex is coming from because, first of all, his product kind of doesn't fit into the tax scheme because it's an exchange and he's collecting much lower revenue from than even we would, okay, as a high volume, low hold sports book. So he's under a lot of financial pressure. And so I understand, and I find some of the things that he's saying are very interesting. And I agree with him. I've been saying, for a while, like, and Adam as well, like how to really encourage innovation in the regulated U.S. industry, it's a really tough thing since there's so much upfront sunk cost on licensing and all of that. They are real questions. The problem is, and this is where I think Alex is going to find difficulty with his, model legislation, is that's not the legislators don't care about that part. They're not in the business of fostering innovation for the most part in their states. Most legislators, are concerned with how do I maximize tax revenue in ways that will be agreeable to our constituents in the state and meet our financial needs. And a lot of what Alex is saying doesn't really get to the heart of what the legislators are primarily concerned with. You may be able to find some legislators in some states that, like New Jersey, should be a prime candidate for something like this, because New Jersey, as we've said in the last couple of weeks, in the face of this proposal to raise our taxes, like that would not be a smart move for New Jersey, because New Jersey got all the jobs, they got all the investment, all the companies are headquartered here. They do their operations across the United States. So things like innovation. So, being smart about the tax rates would really behoove the state to do it, rather than just like, bang, we're going to charge you 25%. But going to other states, you immediately cross the borders. New York clearly does not care. They're like, we're doing fine and we're taking gobs of money. Illinois probably does not care, because they're now the number 2 state in sports betting, both on handle and in tax collection. So it's going to be difficult for, guys like Alex and his company to be able to make an argument to legislators when they're not really getting to the legislators' primary motivation. But I do agree with them. It's hard as hell for startups. And we've seen probably like 95% of startups that have come into this industry since PASPA was overturned just hit a brick wall. And a lot of that is based on the money that they have to pay in order to be in the regulated market.
Adam, I know you did your homework on this one as well. Anything else to add when it comes to the open letter?
I mean, it sort of lost me a bit when it said without the player, there is no industry. Without milk, there's no lactose intolerance. Without cocoa beans, there's no chocolate. Horrible world to live in. But he sort of went into, where they're all sort of going with sweepstakes, prediction models, peer-to-peer, etc. I agree expansion needs to happen for them ultimately be able to collect the niches. I mean, that's why we're in there. We're a startup. We're an expansion sort of product to try and collect some of the pieces that the others aren't. It's super tough. We've said that. Is it feasible? Probably not. We look at sweepstakes, and maybe if we're a few years later, that would have been a better option. But we're in this for the long haul. We're going to try and make it work and pick up those pieces that the big boys aren't really tackling. I mean, I said it in the previous one. I sort of laugh about when offshore is mentioned with what's happening in their own backyard. The startup entry point is exorbitant in the US. If you really want to start a sports book or a casino, look elsewhere. Or sweepstakes. I mean, you named a few. Novi, Profit, playing in the major leagues, and they're going back to the minors. Smart move. It's going to cost them less. There's no, less overheads and things like that. And they can maybe build something that there's some law changes and there's some ways that they're treated differently, and they can move back into sort of mainstream and licensing and things like that. It's just super hard to do it. And we're living it right now. So we know exactly where he's coming from. I think the place where Alex is really winning this game is he's loud. He's leaning into the bet that he's placed. That's ultimately what he's doing. He's out there touting for the bet that they've placed with SportTrade. It's an exchange. We've said very much from the beginning that's not, we don't believe that market works today, but who knows what happens in the future. And it becomes a prediction model. It becomes this, it becomes that. The idea is, and we've even seen DraftKings go out there and register something new. There's ways of doing this. We're one piece. He's one piece. We're competing against behemoths that can go and buy into each of the pieces and have verticals across the whole scheme landscape and collect all those niches. We're in one. He's in one. We have some overlap. But yeah, it's tough. We'll openly admit this is fucking hard work. And we'll push through. We'll see how it goes. We're definitely seeing signs of the positive and results the last 2 or 3 months. We've changed definitely the way we're trading. We've changed some of the technology aspects. We've rethought what KYC means. We've rethought what bonuses mean and all those kind of things. It's hard. So, I understand what he's doing. I've started to think more that we need to do somewhat the same. And while some sort of see Joe moving away from Prime as a loss, I see it as a win and a gain, because I know he has a space out there when he's talking to these legislators and these lobbyists and stuff like that. There's more to win out there than there is in this little boat that we're driving here. So there's a lot of work to do. We're up for it. I know Joe's definitely up for it. And we're just going to keep fighting the good fight and see what we can do. And I'm aligned with Alex. As much as I may disagree with some of the things as his product and stuff like that, we're the little guys. We're always the underdog with the little trains that could. So I'm all in support for what they're doing.
Yeah, it's good to know that the doorknob hitting me in the ass on the way out. It's good for the industry. One last thing. So last week was the next conference in New York. Both Adam and I were at it. I was on a panel with a regulator and other people talking about government. Some of this was the issue. And if there's one thing I like, it's throwing a turd in the punch bowl, talking to the government people, which there were many sitting in the audience. And I said, like, when it comes to sweepstakes, when it comes to offshore, when it comes to all this, it's like, this is in part on you guys, because there's still this kind of old school attitude and old school ways. Adam is saying, like, it's tough, it's the cost and like that. And that's in part because lawmakers and regulators want it tough. They don't think everybody should get a fair shake at their market. You hear the phrase, like, gaming's a privilege, not a right, and that also comes down to the money. There's almost like a means testing. Like, if you can't pay, like, in Illinois, what is it? It's like $10 million up front to get a sports betting license. I think it's even higher in New York State. And then the taxes are high and everything. They're not concerned with that, because to them, they're like, well, we only want the companies that are financially solvent enough that they can handle the prices. That's who we want to do business with. And so that's a challenge that we have. It's like, hey, making the case to them is like, look, this isn't like running the lottery in your state. This isn't like running bricks and mortars. There's an actual benefit to you guys to having a bigger, broader market. And the difficulty is now it's like, okay, well, the market's not finding its way through the regulated process. Sweepstakes is on the states. People want to play online casino, not just in the handful of states that have it legal and regulated. And so now they've found a way, right? Why is that? Well, in part, it's because the states have erected such big walls, and because the incumbents in those states don't want to evolve. They want to stay the way they are. It's a bit like when you listen to, and I know I'm going to anger some people when I say this, it's like listen to the horse racing people, whom I love racing, but it's like listening to the horse racing people talk about how much of the share of the gambling dollar horse racing had back before casino gambling became legalized. Well, Jesus, just imagine how cold it was before we invented fire. Like, this stuff evolves, all right? Like, the world evolves. We don't go backwards, okay? How do you deal with reality? And the reality, it's not being pushed on them by me or Adam or Alex Kane or anybody like that. It's their goddamn customers. If there wasn't demand for this from their citizens right now, all these sweepstakes things, they'd be falling flat on their face, right? But instead, there's massive response. There's massive consumer demand. And regulators are sitting, or not regulators, but lawmakers are sitting there, and they're like trying to protect like the handful of commercial brick and mortar casinos in their state. Now I'm pissing off the AGA. Great. Okay. Well, they're not going to hold it back. It's now time to manage the crash landing. How do they do that? That's what Jersey did. That's what Pennsylvania did. That's what Michigan did, right? And now they have pretty robust integrated markets, both brick and mortar and digital. They can sit around and they can keep trying to erect walls, and they can turn out just like the horse racing industry. Again, all apologies to those guys. I love you, but you're still living like it's 1950. Okay. So until the gaming industry gets a much faster evolution to it, and they start evolving their regs, their laws, their markets to meet this consumer demand, because it's easier now than ever for the consumer to get what they want, even on their little phone, then, we're going to just keep banging our heads against the wall. And what kills me is their solution is to come back and choke the shit out of us, the guys who are playing by the rules, by trying to increase our tax rate instead of finding a way to get more of those companies live and regulated in their marketplace. And then they just have a bigger pool of money. Okay, TED Talk's over.
All right. Well, speaking of taking some of the challenges at hand head on and moving forward, we will make sure to let Adam get on with his day and get to another 1 or 2 countries in the next several hours to start bringing the Bjorn family back together. In the meantime, to the audience, whatever changes you would like to see in sports betting, thanks as always for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn 2. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.